Indian people pretentious. I don't know what is wrong with we. All right. We like just Jeff Chapal on piano over there. We like to believe. Give on, yes. We like to believe we are Englishmen, Canadian, or Yankee. You take a Trinidadian straight from Togo and fly him to New York City. By the time he clear immigration, the man already talking Yankee. You know somebody like this, right? His suitcase full of pigeon peas, but he talk like he born in Los Angeles. The man freezing in the cold, but he buy an umbrella and digging soul. So you see, no boy, Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm sure you will agree. But put a West Indian in New York City, overnight he become Yankee. Yes, a Yankee will live 10 years in Trinidad. He's still talking around Yankee. But a Guyanese lived 2 weeks in Detroit. Hear him. What's happening, David? An Englishman will come in your country with a cocked hat and a cane. And 6 years after, he's still saying wrong, huh? Going home on his plane. But here he West Indian friend, oh George, do come and see us again. And the jackass only drinking tea, like his mother make him in Piccadilly. So you see, no boy, Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm sure you'll understand. Put the West Indian in Nottinghamshire, overnight he's an Englishman. In Ottawa, I met a fella, a very well-dressed young man. He said, you know, I'm from St. Lucia, but I spent a fortnight in London. When did we end up talking like Englishmen when we live in England? How come them Englishmen in the West Indies, they don't say Garblind and Brother Man? For 2 weeks in Leicestershire and Harry Vincentian. Oh, that's super, super. And this clung in Westminster. I'm on 2 weeks sleep here from St. Lucia. St. Lucia. What a bit in a row. I'm sure you'll understand. Yes, put the West Indian in Ontario. Overnight he's a Canadian. Oh, but please don't get the impression I have something against the Englishman. I don't have no chip on the shoulder concerning American. But the Yankees will say, God blind skipper. And think about this also. The Englishman will never tell you, boy, I just hug up the Billy soul. And therefore, I cannot see why, instead of today, I must say today. And don't give me no damn muffin. I grow up on cassava and green planted. So that even when they make a calls, I will be this way. I'll go sneak into heaven, put on the roti and say, Wap Mende.
Dave Martins and the Trade Winds. Boy, oh boy. Well, I mean, my generation and after, you would grow up on that. I remember when we were in high school, just got into high school when Dave Martin was singing these songs in the 70s, and you know, you were reading V.S. Naipaul and Samuel Selvan, but Naipaul in particular, who didn't like West Indians very much. And the way in which Dave Martins would engage in the kind of self-criticism with a smile, with a laugh. You know, he got us to laugh at ourselves because everything that he's saying there was so true, right? I had a neighbor, Sherman. We call him Yankee George. Sherman never went to America, but you couldn't talk Yankee more than he. He was a businessman, you know, and so we all knew somebody who either never went or been for a couple weeks and come back and so on. But the way in which Dave Martins got us to laugh at ourselves, Naipaul was taking that same material, right, and framing us as the third world of the third world. You see? So there we were in school reading Naipaul and sucking your teeth. I mean, you know, Naipaul actually had a novel, those of you remember, has a novel called The Mimic Men. So he was dealing with the same thing, the same mimicking of Americans and Englishmen and so forth, right? But the importance of Dave Martins, and I'm writing something on it. My God, I started to write it before, and then, of course, you know, once one gets to Guyana and the politics began and so forth, the academics have to take back seat. But I started to write that thing, and I was making the point that Naipaul in Mimic Men seemed to make us look bad. And Martins is talking about the same mimicking. He made us laugh at ourselves. And I think that's the importance of Dave Martin. He captures the essence of what it is to be Guyanese. And I am not a person that very lightly separate Guyana from the Caribbean. You all know that. Guyana for me is we are a Caribbean people. But Dave Martins was able to tease out the Guyanese identity within that Caribbean culture, if so to speak. And the way he did the comparative analysis, whether it's the way all the women go on during sex, he has that one. Western women, you know, you all those of you who are Dave Martin people, you know, he got that calypso. Whether he's doing that or he's doing this West Indian, he's, you know, the St. Lucian versus how the Guyanese would say the thing and so on. And he's very good at doing that comparative analysis within the West Indian family. And he doesn't do it in an offensive way. So more than most artists, I think he was able to tease out what is Guyanese. And those of you who like to talk about the Guyanese culture, all right, I think Martin comes closest in the world of art to teasing what it is to Guyanese. I mean, a lot of the things that he speaks about that are germane to the Guyanese expression is also part of the Caribbean expression, but he brings out the Guyanese identity in a way that not many other artists have been able to do. And I think that is his place in the Guyanese cultural expression. He more than any other. And as I said, I started to write something in something that I'm doing, you know, a comparative analysis of Calypsonians across the Caribbean. And I chose him and Rebel from Guyana. And I finished the Rebel piece and I just started the Dave Martins piece, you know. And that's where my head it was going, and is still going, because I have to finish it now as quickly as possible. But I think if we can put our finger on the Guyanese expression within the Caribbean context, Dave Martins does it. For he has a keen ear, you know, because to really express what he is expressing, you know. I'm from St. Lucia. A Guyanese would say differently. What's happening, man? Right? And it's St. Lucia. You have to have a good ear for language and song and so forth. And he had a tremendous. I mean, my students ask me all the time, Dr. Hines, how is it? How do you teach the Caribbean? I mean, so many countries. It's a difficult place to teach, right? Because although we are so similar, we are also different in many ways. In our politics, where the trade that I play, some of the time, sometimes Guyanese politics appear to be very un-Caribbean, very different from the Caribbean. Yet it's similar. Lessons, it's similar, because there is political tribalism in a place like St. Kitts. I mean, the political divide in St. Kitts, I mean, it's as bad as our political divide, although they don't have the kind of ethnic thing that we have. But the tribalism there along party lines is very strong. I used to be astounded when I go in there. I mean, if you were Labour, they probably relax it now. I've been to St. Kitts in a couple of years, and I noticed some Guyanese in St. Kitts joining us on this program. How are you all doing? Good evening. But if you were Labour, you didn't marry Pam. I mean, if you were from Pam or follow Pam, you didn't marry somebody from Labour. That's how bad it was in St. Kitts. Like I said, I haven't been there in a couple of years, so that must have relaxed. But they were very tribal, without the racial element to it, the ethnic element to it. Good evening to you all, and welcome to Politics 101. We have Dr. Jeffrey on tonight, and Dr. Jeffrey is going to talk. Dr. Jeffrey has emerged as the loudest voice for an end to winner-take-all politics. And I've been asking myself that question for the last couple of days. We appeared on a panel at Coffee 250's annual State of the African Guyanese Symposium Forum this past weekend, and Aubrey Norton, myself, were there, and Jeffrey. Jeffrey was more passionate about an end to winner-take-all politics. And I was reflecting, because Aubrey and myself were part of a group, different parties, part of a group in the PNC. Aubrey was, that included Vincent Alexander, McAllister, Sherwood Lowe, and others who were rooting for shared governance. In fact, they in a sense coined the term shared governance. We in the WPA called it power sharing. And we all were there in the front lines saying, this winner-take-all politics must go. We must have power sharing. We were passionate about it. And Jeffrey was not part of it at that time. And I was asking myself, why Jeffrey appears more passionate than we are? And perhaps, perhaps it's because we are in active politics, but I think it more has to do with a kind of tiring, getting tired. And I know a lot of you all here on this program don't like the power sharing thing. And Kwayana once, well, not once, he said to me a couple of years ago that he doesn't use the terms a lot anymore, because he doesn't want to give the impression that he wants to share somebody power. The PPP like to say you want power through the back door. And in many regards, their attitude has influenced a lot of the mass response to power sharing. Look, I think, and Jeffrey has said this here, and I agree with him, if tomorrow the PNC say they for power sharing and the PPP said they for power sharing, the follows will go along. I think at a gut level, people understand that the thing is the way to go, but it's the political parties that are standing in the way. But I'm saying all that to say that Henry Jeffrey has emerged as the loudest voice on this issue, and this thing has been around there. Guyana first raised it in 1961 in what he called joint premiership. The proposal became known as partition, but the proposal was really a joint premiership thing in which he said, look, if we're going to avoid the mess that we seem to be heading into, we should have a situation where after the election, we have Mr. Burnham, Mr. Jagan as joint premiers. And he went through and he laid out the mechanism. And he said that, well, if he was convinced that Jagan was not going to go down the road. And he said, if Jagan doesn't go down the road, then as a last resort, avoid the bloodshed, then we should go to partition. And the partition was a partition in 3 zones: an African zone, an East Indian zone or Indian Guyanese zone, and the free zone for people who want to live together. So even the partition thing, analysts have not spent time going through. And Kwahena told me something. He said, look, he didn't want to put partition in the proposal. He was making a proposal on behalf of ASRE, the African Society for Racial Equality. And others, I think the next living person other than Kwahena is what's his name? But he was a student of H.H. Nicholson, Vigilance, and they all said put partition in. Kwahena didn't agree, but as a team player, and he was the person who was going to present on behalf of the group. He went along with the team and he put partition in it. And of course, he is pinned with partition. No, he didn't want to put it in there. But the crux of the thing was shared governance, and that was 1961. That's before Sir Arthur Lewis in 1965. Kwahena doesn't get as much credit. Part of it is because of laziness, because our academics really go by what they read in somebody's book rather than go and do actual research and go to primary documents and so forth. So everybody said Kwahena partition and everybody repeated and so on and so forth. But essentially he was saying joint premiership. Joint premiership. And later on, it became known as power sharing and then shared governance. But Jeffrey is passionate about it, and he's constantly challenging us to recognize how central the whole notion of winner take all politics is to our political motions. And when you dissect all the things that we quarrel about, it goes back to that issue of winner take all, and whether we can continue to carry that burden much longer. That's it. Jeffrey's last 2 columns. One is Skullduggery, and another is a response to Rohi, who was responding to him. One is in today's papers, the response to Rohi in today's papers, today's Kaitro News. So Dr. Jeffrey's here, and we're going to lead off our discussion on this issue of the urgency of settling that problem. When I came into the WPA in the 1970s as a teenager, 14, 15, Clive Thomas, and I would hear Clive Thomas especially talking about a political solution. And the political solution, of course, included power sharing. The WP in 1979 came up with a government of national unity and reconstruction. And Walter Rodney was the moving force behind that document. So the thing was very much part of this political solution. Although Jeffrey doesn't use the term political solution, that is exactly what he's talking about, central to a solution to what we are experiencing now. You know, a PPP person called me yesterday to check up how you're doing, David, and so on. You know, I still have friends in the old guard in the PPP, and one of them called me, and how you're doing, and so forth. And he was asking me about the experience when power sharing was raised during the coalition period. And I had gone back and done my own research on myself, and I found 10 instances where I criticized the coalition for not raising, for not going forward with the issue of shared governance. And I didn't know it was so many times that I publicly commented on the failure of the coalition. And this PPP person was reminding me that I was critical of the coalition for not pursuing shared governance. And he was asking what the experience was like, what it was when you raised that to people who had power in their hand. And I said, you don't have to ask me. Ask you people them who run in the government now, but power sharing or shared governance. And the response they give to you is the same response I got from the other side. When people get power in their hands, it's difficult to ask them to quote unquote share that power, not share their power, but share the people's power proportionally. And I tell him, talk to them and call me back next week and tell me what your thing is. Let me bring in Dr. Jeffrey. Dr. Jeffrey.
David, how are you?
I am good, reminiscing as on this question of shared goal. You were not originally a fellow traveler. And I think you tell the story of Winifred Gaskin's son, no?
Yes.
Coming to you. And there's no harm in telling a story many times. But one of the things I learned about the Americans and the British and the Europeans, they tell the same story every single day. And it's something I guess we in the Caribbean haven't really developed. But tell us your first response to this whole notion of power sharing, your initial response, your skepticism, and then your movement towards it as part of a political solution.
Well, David, as you may well know, I did politics, not political science or political sociology, but political philosophy. And I never paid attention to people like John Stuart Mill and so on, because we were doing Locke, Rousseau, and all that sort of people. And, you know, one of the first things, the first time I came upon shared governance, I started to think, if you share, what would happen if you are sharing government between the two largest parties? Essentially, what it would mean, you would have an opposition, and you must have a serious opposition to go forward. I think in my first budget or second budget presentation in 1992 to 1993, I made those points. I said, you know, the context in which we are, people are going to raise notions of shared governance. And I'm saying, I said then that, but shared governance, you wouldn't really have a strong opposition. In those days, you didn't have all this social media. Today, you got too much opposition. I mean, you can hardly say anything, and it's on the social media. I don't know. Even the politicians seem to be taken over by these things. As Brown called it, the British Prime Minister, he said the problem with social media is essentially it's a forum without any referee. You go on there, you go on there with serial life. But effectively, that was my position at that time. No, and that you can. What could happen? The PPP had only win the election, and remember, I was in the PPP. So effectively, I said the PPP only win this election about 3% of the vote or something. They had 53% or something in 1992. And I said, hey, if you properly organize, you can beat them. And they, Janet Jackson, told me afterward that I shouldn't be telling people that can beat the PPP. I said, but I wrote, I said, well, then what kind of democracy you have if you can't lose? You must be able to lose, or else the other parts. Indeed, I wrote something about that when we had all the disturbances in around 19.
Just 1997, 98.
Yeah. I wrote something about it. I said, if you can't lose, well, what democracy you have? Democracy is that people must be prepared, and the context must be prepared in a sensible way so you can lose. So anyway, so I was there. But then I went and read John Stuart Mill. And he says, that was a hell of a thing. First of all, I didn't read John Stuart Mill. That was my position until I ran into Gregory Gaskin. We all used to go to a what you would call a rum shop, but I mean, a Rupa on the train line when we finished as minister. We used to go to me, Shake Back, Sever, and Gregory Gaskin used to be around then. And so one day he came to me and he said, Jeff, I want you to think carefully about this thing. And he gave me a paper that he says, read this. If you tell me when you come back that this shared governance thing is nonsense, I'll say it's nonsense. And I don't. I mean, I'm not a politician, I'm a lawyer, I'll go down my way. But as I read Gregory Garfield thing, and then it's after that I went and read Mill. Because essentially we say, even if you have, you win a thing by 1 or 2 seats, what gives you the right really? At that time, I didn't read Sir Arthur Lewis, I must admit. So Arthur Lewis make the point better. But what gives you the right to make decisions? You go, for instance, the president go to the Amerindians today and he says, we will give you, Americans are 10% of the population. It's not for him to give nothing. The resources they are not his to give. You should have a proper Amerindian representative, not the one he's suborned to sit down and determine what Amerindians really want. This is not a matter of the PPP giving you nothing. It's a matter of your resources, and you should have the opportunity, as Lewis said, it is immoral to think that you will have an ethnic group. And I'm talking about it, Lewis is well known, he's one of a Nobel Prize winner for the Caribbean. He said it's immoral for you to have a group out of power, an ethnic group out of power for 5 years, and you making all sort of unilateral decision because more or less that's what happens because the British kind of a system. It couldn't happen in Suriname because if you ever did that, the president to become president have to have 2/3 majority. In the parliament, you can't just become president with a 1-seat majority. So you essentially, what he was saying is twofold. Not from just the way you see it as a nice way to get politics for us to run Guyana night, but he was making the point, Greg, was essentially making the point that this thing is immoral. We are an ethnic divided society. You gotta be a joker not to realize that that we are. And therefore the ethnic groups must have a right at the table, because PVP is an ethnic party. It's an ethnic Indian party. That is what it is, and so is the PVP. Essentially, they got a mind. They like to see themselves as multicultural and whatsoever, but they are ethnic parties. They're represented essentially African and Indian people, and the Indians or Africans should not have that right, and their representative, at the absence of our representative, to stand out there and say and make all the decisions. It gets worse when you come down to the situation of what's happening now, because the Aubrey Norton or the PVPNC says Jagdo rigged the last election. He said he's not talking to them in any proper way. I mean, imagine. And the system allows it. So effectively, after I read Grave Greeting, I started poking around, because it led to other thing. I ran into James Shotmer, John Shotmer, who said that it's not going to happen when you have two ethnic groups standing apart. And you know, David, because of that, not until the 60s that they found a solution for this thing, 57 around that time. Because they're saying, he said that you are doomed, you will never be a democracy. You will never have representative democracy in a country like such as ours. We are doomed. It's until the end of the 50s, into the 60s, that you start seeing people say, you mentioned that the timing, but the British, I think it's the same Quayana who pointed out that the British offered this thing to Chedi Jagan. Maybe Chedi Jagan refused.
Initially.
Yeah, no, but he refused then.
Yes.
He refused then.
He refused then, yes.
Yeah, right. It's after Burnham in power for some considerable time in the 70s, 76, 77.
The National Patriotic Front.
But remember, when the British offered it, you know, I had always thought, how can the British not offer this to Guyana, and they got the same problem in Cyprus, and they're offering it to the Cypriot, you know, the Greek Cypriot thing there, and they offer shared government. Why did they come forward and offer it to Guyana? Because, I mean, it's around the same time, and it's not even similar. It's same time all these things happening. So, but then Quayana Compass said they did offer it, and I heard it from others that they did offer this shared government during the constitutional discussion of where go. Jagan refused. Now we know why he might have refused. Because he had already made commitment to the Soviets. He made commitment, there's no question about that. He said he's going to drag Guyana and the Caribbean into the communist fold. That's what he said. And you think the Americans had found that? They found it out, the CIA all over the place. And they spread it around the Caribbean to the leaders. So when you see the Caribbean leaders call on Jagan, the Americans would have told them that, hey, they would never show them, and they said, we have sufficient information, but they will not say where it was. And now we see the letter, because obviously if they start telling their sources, you know, people can get in serious trouble. So, but then Jagan said no. He said no to it because he had just written a letter, he and Janet, and telling them that the socialists are the majority in his party, and so on, and he needs some resources. He's knocking Burnham to take resources from America, who come to Burnham and say, join us to stop his communism. And he bought Burnham, so well, you have mega money to do all of this thing. Yeah. He went and asked the communist body to do this. Well, not to do, no Indian gave Jagan any mandate to do that. Don't tell me that he was working for no Indians. No Indian more capitalist than black people. No Indian gave Jagan any mandate to go write a letter to the Soviet Union and the Soviet International and communists to say that they will carry thing into it. I always know Jagan was a communist. All my life, me and he quarrel about this. I said, you're a communist. There's no question about this. I want not to do this kind of thing, communist. I know Marxism. I read a lot of Marxism. Indeed, my PhD is a lot on Marxism. But I respect Marx in the sense of the Marx of alienation and that sort of thing. So don't fool me about that. But the Marx that their thing is a Leninist Marx. It's a Leninist Marx. A Marx that says essentially, we can build socialism in one country and all that sort of thing. So I says, no word out of me. That thing let you see it. There are all sort of people going to Siberia and all that sort of thing. So after I read that thing, after I did all that little research, I said, there's no, and not only a research, I'm waiting for somebody else to show me the way forward. Don't just tell me, let me continue as we are. If you can do what Gregory Gaskin, bring up and show me another process of dealing with societies with this ethnic divide, great. And don't tell me nonsense is the people's fight. You need to change the people. Constitutional reform got to take people as they are. When the Americans went on changing their constitution, you think America is a pure majoritarian system? Then they let Rican get how many million votes more than Trump?
Yes.
And lose. In California, got 40 million people, and the Rhode Island's got about 2. And they gave the same amount to Senate. Senators. Pure majoritarianism is not good for countries that are not homogeneous.
Yeah. And you mentioned the Americans.
Yes.
What is not well known is, first of all, when the Americans, when they went to Philadelphia, they didn't go to change the Constitution. They went there to strengthen the Articles of Confederation. And in the end, they realized that would have been insufficient, and they had to change the Constitution. But their fear of the king, they entertained a proposal for a joint presidency, a multi-person presidency. It came from the small state in New Jersey proposal. Part of it was joint. A lot of people don't. The Americans almost went to power sharing, and that was 200 and odd years ago. You see, so this issue is an old issue.
Yes, but America did go to power sharing. What do you think it is when you say California can have 40 million people, only got 2 senators?
That's
Both
right.
senators got too much power. What you think Suriname got when he said the president cannot have? The president can't be, you can't become president if you can't win 2/3 of the majority in the parliament. What do you think that is? Effectively, that is it. I said it numerous times. Democracy is about the rule of law based upon a system of majority rule acceptable to both of us.
Right.
That is it. When some of the states they want to join, Hamilton and these chaps ain't gonna write plenty things saying, please join up. They say you got to put in Bill of Rights. You ain't go put in Bill of Rights and all of that.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that people mustn't think this majority rule is the rule of how much percent of vote the British government got that run in Britain now?
34, 35.
34.
Yes.
So it's nowhere is it majority rule. Just pure majority rule. It's a form of majority rule that's acceptable to all of us. Because at one time, the Americans were saying, anytime for this constitution to pass, Everybody got to agree, got to be unanimous. Then they come it and say sufficient numbers. So, and now we say substantially all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that got to be about 80% of the people. Any constitution you have must have the stamp of substantially all of us. About 80% of us must agree to it.
Jeffrey, I want you to take you back, because having at a theoretical level accepted that this power sharing, shared governance thing could be the political solution for us, you went a step forward and you tried to bring the two parties together. All right. What was that experience like? I mean, the PNC apparently under Corbyn was ready to go down the road. The PPP gave you the impression that they were ready. In the end, I think Jack Dio gave the impression that it's Janet Jagan Scotland the thing.
Jack, you ain't give no impression that that is what happened.
Well,
That is what happened.
talk to us.
Jack, you didn't try to give no impression.
Barrett, I take it back. I take it back. You didn't try to give the impression. Yes,
no, it happened. All right. This is a funny story. So myself and Luncheon, we are partners and things. And if I go out there and he got people inside, I don't mind. I just go in and sit down. I don't bother with any meeting, and I just do what I want to do. But I hear him talking about, and if you can't trust the PNC, they will not. That's we telling somebody outside. And anything they say, That's when the PNC was out of parliament. Remember that time when they boycott parliament. So I said, Luncheon, what are you? When the people gone, I said, Roger, what's the matter with you? Were you telling people them foolishness? He said, Jeffrey, this is the problem. And so we got this quarrel in there. I said, Luncheon, give me 2 weeks and the PNC back in parliament. He said, here we go again. Here we go again. Mr. Noel. And he tried throwing up. I said, 2 weeks and PNC back in parliament. He said, let me think about it, but I know what you mean. Let me go and consult. So I said, go and consult. He come back about 2 weeks later. I said, all right, we want to do, what is this? What is this thing, so? I said, well, what is this thing? So you got, first of all, we got to call, we got to get together with Corbyn and the chaps. And secondly, you got to call them, you got to tell them you wish to discuss things that they need and so on, how they can get. He said, all right, that's easy enough. You're going to call Corbyn. By which time I know one or two people in the PNC, so I called them. So I said, this thing coming up thing there, and it's got to be solved. They can't be out of parliament. And, what is the point? I mean, can't just be there out of parliament. And at that time, if they were out of parliament, no, Jack, you would sit down, God, keep them out. But at that time, still, I said, so myself, and I can name one person, Granty Walrod. He was my main person I talking to get the message further than Corbyn and Canterbury lands. Those were the two negotiators.
Lance Carberry.
Yeah. And the two negotiators on the People Peace side was the president and Luncheon. As far I was only there, somebody maybe start this thing and so on. So I wasn't there in any other fashion than that. And 2 weeks come, but by time 2 weeks come, we were really into this. They were really into this. I think it lasts about 4 weeks, 5 weeks. But they were back in parliament. They come to an agreement, the constructive engagement. Now, if you go back and look at that thing, a lot of good things were said. That's after when they start saying, oh, government giving Corbyn money, they're bribing Jagio, they're bribing here. It's an agreement under the constructive agreement. That's
so what happened to power sharing?
You're going to look after the office of the
of the opposition
the
leader.
leader of the opposition, and all that sort of thing. And me and Derek Bernard sit down and work out how you're going to share time. Those papers still around. How you going to share time in the media, in the government media? We sit down at the Georgetown Club working those things out. And that's when Derek told me a very interesting thing. And I'm just going to say it in passing, because now by the time I'm looking for my car, there's the car gone, my dad must be gone with it. So I said, Eric, I need a lift. Gone to. And as he's taking me, he said, Henry, let me tell you something I learned late. He said, the Ministry of Education is just not about schools and those things, He said, you got nearly, how many uneducated people you have on the streets? Every year, how many people don't get past anything and they're out there. They are danger to the society. We have to get TVET education. And that got to be extracurricular outside of the education system. You need a strong system out there to bring these people in, to give them some kind of qualification. All of these people, and that's when I started all this TVET really on a push. By the time I left, we were setting up TVET things. This thing they're talking about TVET, up to today, they are not part of the Caribbean TVET arrangement properly. So, but he told me that, and then I started doing that. So we did that, and it was left for instance, it said, oh, you must have a development plan for Linden. You ever had a development plan for Linden? No. But I can tell you something, what the problem started. Oh, I know it's not bad, but I see about sit down there and tried at that time to get something going. That's my view anyway, that he actually tried. And because what time in the morning we finished with Ian Corbin, nobody don't want to go back to the party. Because they know if they go back to the party and they're going to tell them some long story about we need to discuss this 50 years from now and all this Saturday. We need plenty of discussion. So he wants to finish. Corbin wants to finish. And they sat there. And until about, I can't remember, 2 o'clock in the morning. Remember next day's cabinet? This was Monday. At 2 o'clock in the morning. So, and then they called press conference for the next morning, because after that they agreed that certain thing to give in. This one to give in a little bit, that one give in a little bit. People sign up for the constructive agreement. Next day come. Well, you got to come back for cabinet 9 o'clock or whatsoever it was about that time. So I'm coming. And Bart come to me, he said, what? Well, I wanted one of the documents, So I say, I'm keeping a document. I got one because I think, when he come, where's the document you have? I said, what do you mean? What is it? I got it. He said, you give it to anybody, a copy. I said, I give one to Shake back. He said, take it back. I said, why? He said, because they're saying I sign things I'm not supposed to sign.
Oh, Lord.
He said, I called a meeting downstairs. And I said, but hold on, we been here for weeks. And think. Anyway, then when we get into the meeting, after whatsoever meeting they had downstairs or whatsoever quarrel they did have, to be true, I give it to Ramgar, and I hear these one a few people that got to start quarrel to take a jack the opposition. But the point is that we done gone, they call up the press conference next morning. We go press conference. Janet John blue. So blue. Anything ever come out of that? No. And you'll have a hard time. Even Jack, you can't tell me when he go there, he didn't go with a good faith. Even he can't tell me so. whatsoever political motives he might have now to say so. Even he can't convince me of that because I see good faith trying at that time. So nothing come out of it. The Linden plan, umpteen other things. Instead of that, everything went down the tube.
Yeah, unfortunate. And you know, I'm from the WPA, and in 1992, after that election, there was a similar experience. We were trying to get a joint WPA PPP government with the WPA input into the government, and they were talking. And eventually, I understand Jagan told them, I don't have enough jobs for the boys. And that was the end of it. He wanted Clive Thomas rather than the WPA. The WPA said, no, if you want Clive Thomas, you have to want the WPA, you know. So the PPP has that history of Scotland joint government.
You know, there's a lot of stories. One, Jagan, I was talking to Jagan long before. When I was in the PNC, I used to carry Jagan to talk at coffee at Korokoro.
Mm-hmm.
Malcolm Paris is alive. Malcolm called me and he asked him, he's still alive. Here he says, Jeffrey, Harry, who tell you can invite Jagan? I said, somebody got to tell me to invite them, not the principal here. He says, but you can't invite Jagan. I said, why? This is not party college. Jagan is the leader of the opposition. He has a right. He has a right to come here like anybody else. I don't understand why I can't sing Jagan. No, you won't get yourself in trouble. I said, ask Malcolm, he's alive. Sorry, man.
So, he might be Malcolm. He might be listening to the program because
yeah, he might well be.
He's a regular listener.
He's there. So I said, well, but when people call, he's calling me from the office of the general secretary where I used to work. Yeah. And I said, shit, I might be in some really big trouble here now. But I said, you know what happened? None of the other ministers I invited in turn up. Not one of them. Mark David sent Narchester, lives in Bartica now. Mark David.
Wilfred.
Yes, yeah. Mark Wilfred. Mark David sent Mark Wilfred as his representative, but nobody else said turn up. So my thing was to just be chairman and let these ministers and think talk to Jagan. So now Mark David didn't send anybody. Jagan gonna have the rule of the rules. I know how to call Boston. He's alive. I said, Boston, he's the teacher girl. I said, Derek, you got to share this story. I got to go take on Jagan because it's not going to happen. You can't let Jagan come to the college and rule the rules. And I mean, without any question. So me and Jagan was in a quarrel, but me and Jagan always had those quarrels long before. So effectively, he knows me and him and his communism, and he trying to tell me about communist democracy is better in people's democracy. And the same old thing. Indeed, at that place, a chap come like an embassy man. He was European. He came in the meeting, and people said, "Oh, must be a Cuban comrade." Derek, or I think it's Derek who said, "Oh, look like a Cuban comrade has come to the meeting." The person called gentleman says, "Oh, may I make this quite clear? I'm not from the Cuban embassy. I'm from the embassy of the United States of America." Because this was unusual for you to get leader of the opposition coming and talking a government institution, and it must be got around. So, and so on. So effectively, myself and Jagan has been around a long time, and therefore, I think that, but we have left all that aside. Mm-hmm. And look where we are today.
Look where we are. Jeffrey, you in your recent column, you boldly says that that the PNC engaged in electoral malpractice, and you said they were correct in given what you know now. But you also said that the PPP has been engaged in political malpractice. Rohi seems to think otherwise. He says, well, no, it's human, what do you call it? The human factor, the
Context. Human
human.
context.
Yes, and you said, but that is the problem. You're admitting that there is malpractice, there was malpractice, and that GCOM is not able to conduct an election without that kind of malpractice. You see, even for PNC supporters, I think they've accepted, look, the PNC rig election.
Yeah.
And the PPP members have done so with that poll that said only 20% of Guyanese believe that elections were free and fair. So what is Roy talking about?
Roy ain't talking about anything. Roy talking about his little job at GCOM.
Clement, if you're listening, because I know you just watch.
But what else can he be talking about? The truth is, let me make it quite clear here. I mean, Clement Hart, in a thing, but he knows me. If I got to tell you something, I tell you particularly political things. You can hear it. You ain't got to like it. I'm not looking for love for that. But effectively, the PPP, if they did two things in this country, if the PPP ain't racist and not doing things to harm Afro-Guyanese and the Amerindians, in terms of the disparity of wealth, as I said in the article, by now, not that article, the one previous, they would have done an ethnic disparity analysis. The British do it and they didn't have to. Do an ethnic disparity analysis. They got money. Show where everything is going. I said, when they come to office, they put capital works, double it, and cut public servants' pay remuneration part by half. Now I'm saying, where does that capital work go? It goes to their people because largely they are the contractors of any worth. And don't tell me, I hear somebody, I don't know if this Bart said, but I don't know, that we must try and get into business. I said, that is not the business of government. The business of government is to know that any work I'm doing in the society, I must be properly remunerated for. And then try essentially to see why it is that I am not in business or you are not in the public service, and try to get equitability along the road. That is the job of government, not to sit down and preach about what I was 30 years after, 70 years nearly after independence. You were this, I was this, and that. And that's why I said to you, I said, effectively, until you or anybody can bring another system that don't tell me about not shared governance. And effectively, they should do ethnic disparity study, such as the British, to do two things: dispel our contention, because if it's done properly, you do that. But on the other hand, it will come up with process and thing so that everybody, you can put on the block there, so everybody would see how you're trying to lift people out. Now walk around throwing 2 penny here, throwing 2 penny there, and tell me that what? You go to the Amerindian and talk how you giving them 26%. When you get how much you got, the Amerindian must be central in that decision making, because they still pittance in terms of how you're getting your total resources. And so if they want that, they would have done that ethnic. Secondly, why is it that they don't want to go to court to prove what's his name wrong? If I'm wrong, you learn feel wrong. And don't tell me, so many people going to vote like that. It was done in where it was
Kenya,
Myanmar, whatsoever, not Myanmar. Anyway, it was 500,000 people voted, and the court threw out the elections. So Why wouldn't I want to test it in the court? Why? Why I doing everything for the matter not to get to the court? Indeed, on the other hand, you ask, how can an ex-president forget to put the paper in on time? For the and how can Vincent Alexander tell me that after the big recount they brought in all the recount, that the people of the recount said the report never came to them?
The CARICOM people.
So how? You think Guyanese are idiots? You see what you have me in there? These people don't want this thing to be properly done. And I have no thing about that. You know, elections, the established news on them like to carry things, say, oh, look, and don't worry, all of this happened on elections day. Don't be, not going to be such naivety. Elections are not rigged on election day, not the best elections. Long before election day, elections are rigged. For instance, the British were get by gerrymandering the PPP. Look, one seat in quarantine, you got 18,000 people. One seat in Georgetown, you got 5. That is the notion of democracy. So don't tell me re-election or regular, but gerrymander was not Colonel gerrymander or major come from America. You teaching American thing, you should know.
Yes.
They start gerrymandering, and to this day they're gerrymandering thing against black people in America.
Yeah. They call it racial suppression now.
So don't tell me about what's happening on election day. The problem is election day. Election day leads to trouble when the other party look around and say, oh, like they're outrigging us or something like a sort of, but look, where are the papers for this? Where are the documents for this? Where are the documents? And those things must be trashed out by GCOM. I put it on my net at that time. I found it, I said, GCOM has to deal with this matter. It cannot, this is not a matter to go. This is a managerial decision, a judiciary decision. GCOM must deal with it. Now the Chief Justice said GCOM had all the powers to deal with those matters and fail to. And tell the people about go after election petition. That never was or never will be.
Mm-hmm. Norton raised this weekend, Jeffrey, the issue of what he sees as a dilemma. That when you talk about having shared governance before the election and articulating that kind of position would mean that if you don't get it, you are suggesting that you may not participate in the election. And that giving the impression that you're not participating in the election is suicidal. In effect saying that his hands are tied. Do you buy that?
Oh, come on. Let me tell you something. I believe all right. If perchance, I think just now I didn't answer one of your question because as move off these things so often. But if Norton, as he said, the most important is to reorganize his party. If you want to reorganize your party, you just don't say, oh, hey, let's reorganize. You got to reorganize it. Teach people to reorganize around certain themes. There is no better theme for him to reorganize this party with than with shared governance. Shared governance, one. Winning the election, two. This is not one or not or this. Winning the election is two. Equity is three for everybody. Amerindian rights. They might be 10%, but they got serious rights they must have. And they got problem with it. And that should be part of the old question of shared governance. Over certain things in their area, They should be given a veto that the government can't do without. They got different forms of veto. Veto could be permanent or it can be transient, in the sense you can have a veto for such time, for such people to intervene, and all those. You can sit down and we discuss that. But you can't just come to the American and give you 26%. 26% of what? Your total budget? No, but of some money that was coming to you. But you now don't even need the 26% because you got so much coming out of the way. You don't even need the addition. So you are telling them you're giving 20-something%, and all of it is their money, like it's our money. So when you come and say, I give you 26% of what you're supposed to have, or what was supposed to come from this thing, you are really not, it doesn't even harm the government budget. So effectively, Mr. Norton want to organize his party, must have some themes around which to organize it. The most effective one. You know why it's the most effective one? Largely because a whole lot of people fed up. Indian people, all sort of people, just fed up with this thing being going on for 70 years. And if there is a way out, they will try and get it. And therefore, he should try to organize his party around that. That could feed into the notion of elections, and the election should feed into everything about equitability. Mm-hmm. You can't organize no party better than that in Guyana by just sitting down and say, oh, don't worry, state governance, we can just organize it. For what? Win the election? What if you lose?
What if you lose? Jeffrey, you were on the stage in Buxton a couple of weeks ago when Eric Phillips argued strenuously that there should be no coalition, that parties should go separately on the opposition side and have a minority government, and that would force what you are asking for through shared governance. That could force some kind of consensus on the part of the political parties. Where do you stand on that?
I think that is confusing. As things stands now with the party, and now Guyanese vote, is every party got a black leader. So why not come together? Well, what point you making? You think Nigel gonna go and get any big vote more than anybody else? It's not going to happen. It's not gonna happen. Good example. PPP is the best example. Look at all from Ravi Dev, all them farm party, Ram Sami, all of them farm party to come
Tennessee.
Indian vote from Jagan. It ain't happen. So why not? And then when you go by yourself, the likelihood is that the PPP would get the only reason that the AFC joined with the PNC the last time, because they want to win the presidency, really, because they have already taken the parliament. They already had that. I don't think so. I think that's a bit. I said it's confusing. I don't even see that as a possibility. When what you have, if you're going to an election, you got to win everything. And our system is a plural. It's a plurality. It can be hard for any one of the single party to say they beat the PPP as a single party. So no, I don't bother.
So none of the three parties that are active on the opposition side, the PNC, the AFC, the WPA, none of them has indicated in any concrete way that they're moving towards a coalition. Is it too early for that? Is it? What are they doing? What are they doing in your estimation?
Well, obviously, why they're how you gonna negotiate if you are already showing you all that you need? I mean, come on, David. You gotta how you gonna negotiate? Nobody PNC can say, oh, we're gonna go alone, but PNC know it's not a feasible option. They must know that. I mean, they've been in the politics long ago. You You know, the smaller party know that dead end if the thing is to stop the PPP. So yes, but nobody can come out and say one wants to say that this one needs us this. You say, I don't, Mr. Green just say in his article the weekend, you must catch him on your program to talk to him.
You Sharon, that's a thing. No, me and he don't talk. Me and he don't talk. You won't come with program.
Sharon Das,
Me and he
Sharon
follow.
Das was not the problem.
But I agree with you that I found his article this weekend stunning, given that Granger's really not said much about what happened. And then out of the blues, he came with that Sharon Das thing.
Yes, because no. Or Sharon Das was a means to an end for the other side. Sharon Das is not the problem. Sharon Das, yeah, but you want to make Sharon Das, you want to go into this moral thing about how the people lament the party. He promised thing and then do it, and he all right. He's not immoral, but Sharon Das is immoral. And now he tells you, I didn't do it. He's saying for the most part, I didn't do it because I already had shared governance. And guess who is he sharing this governance with? With all best respect. He said respect. I mean, outside of you and the AFC who came in with him, which is not part of the team, none of these people can get 2 votes if they're on the road. But there's this shared I read this thing. You say you were stunned. I said, this cannot be. Shared governance is not about party. It's not about the party, sharing of things. It is about ethnic problem you have.
Yeah.
How many ethnic votes they gonna get? Then you're gonna know if you got shared governance. When the PNC did this thing, Vic, Rudy and Sonali. Rudy and Sonali who think.
Yeah.
Rudy is not a patch-up to talk about politics. Rudy called me, said, but Henry, these people say they're going to have shared governance. What are they doing? And they're saying what they have is shared governance with the AFC. The AFC on one legs anyways in terms of ethnic. When the AFC was started after with its most seat in London in 2006 was when the PNC had fallen apart because of Corbyn and you want to. But the point is, so I said, is that people in the AFC be taking votes from us?
Right.
So I said, but and he's saying, yes, this is already our stance. We have already got shared governance. Now, particularly, we got the AFC, and then half of them want to overthrow the AFC. They're great. OFC can go, they get too much seats in parliament and all that sort of things you've been hearing at that time. Instead of using the Burnham Constitution, this week I'm going to do something on what Ralph said last week. Because Ralph said something, what you just mentioned, that Jagan, you remember when Jagan came with his project, and he said he was willing to take the prime ministership in 1977.
Right.
Yes. Born right to write the constitution for all. But if Bornham sat back and wrote the constitution in a way that the prime minister can get out as much power as you want to give him. But he didn't constitutionalize the amount of power he can get. But the prime minister can get anything. Jagan, when we were minister, Jagan allowed us to chair cabinet all the time. Why you care about if you are the president and you got to sign off against any law and rules? Why not let Moses run the country and let him have the thing? Instead of that, they're gonna take it back, saying, and he got that in the article today. The law, the
rules,
right
in the face of the Constitution.
Yeah, they're for constitutional rules. Everybody in the PPP government must be, in my time, at some point or another, chair the cabinet. So if Idi Moses, I mean, these are a chair cabinet and actually run the country day to day. Why not? You will build them up, but you will build them up. You have to have enough sense to build them up in your opposition support base that you don't have. So effectively, but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey here, as usual, when Jeffrey's on, as you're saying here in the comment section, I mean, you get political science, you get politics, and you get some, as Jagan used to say in the old days, straight talk. Um, Henry, thanks a lot for coming through again,
No
and I will see you in 2 weeks. But the way things are going, I may see you before, because there are all these forums that are happening that are taxing us and calling on our perspectives and expertise, so to speak. But thank you. Thank you
All
for
right,
coming.
thank you, and thank you for your audience for having me too. Thank you.
And to you, the audience, as usual. Flash Gordon, good night. Cyril Walker, Michael. Michael is asking, he's hoped that I will meet with Aubrey and Nigel soon. Yes, a lot of people are saying that. They're asking that. But we shall see. I am in contact with Nigel. Aubrey more than I am with Nigel. But we have not formally met to discuss any coalition thing. I think it seems to me that all three parties are trying to put their own house in order, and then at some point um, they will begin to talk about a coalition. Um, the issue of a consensus presidential candidate is up in the air, and I think that is going to be a point of contention. In my own view, it ought not to be a point of contention, but I suppose this is how politics work, and we shall see. But what I'm hearing on the ground, whether it's in Golden Grove, where I was, or in Buxton, or in New Amsterdam, in Georgetown. I didn't get across the river too much. I haven't gotten across there. But and on this program and other programs, people want a coalition. People want a coalition. But politics have a practical side to it, and political parties have to feel their way and see. The issue, as I said, is always what, if you're the smaller party, what you bring. And by smaller, we mean a party that has not in the past had large electoral support. What is it you bring to the table? And I think the AFC and the WPA are very conscious of that. What is it you bring to the table? Lynette is saying Buxton is waiting, and the rest of Guyana too. Yes, Buxtonians have been tearing my tail. They've been tearing my tail about two things. First, the WPA's own position and the presidential candidate and so on. And I think we solved that. They've been on my case for that, because they claim that I promote Aubrey and Nigel and not promoting myself and the WP. And I couldn't promote myself. My party has to promote me. And I think the party has done that, and Buxtonians are satisfied. You know the tribal story, the Buxtonians like to see their own, like any village. But Buxton, they have that little extra thing, is the company water they drink, and the train line that they sit down and they get a little thing. But we were able to self-Buxton, and they, once that is taken care of, they then start to ask, well, what happened to the coalition thing now? Because of course that famous picture at the line top there on July the 31st of Nigel, Aubrey, and myself still very much in people's minds. And so yes, Buxtonians are saying, well, we solve one problems now, the problem, David, what next? And the political leaders, I am sure, are listening, and we shall see what the coming weeks bring. Tomorrow night, we're going to have Eric Phillips here, and we're going to be talking about African Guyanese issues. Remember, we started that series last week, and we are going to think. Thomas Robertson saying, I think the PNC, WPNFC meets Mr. JFK, Mr. Jeffrey DHK, and Mr. Eric Phillips should be part of that meeting. My thoughts. Yes, it's an interesting idea, Thomas, because I can tell you, as someone who has one foot inside as a politician and one foot outside as a political activist, politicians are very difficult to deal with. And whenever you have people who are not day-to-day politicians around, they tend to be a little bit circumspect. So that's a good idea, to have people there kind of mediating. But we shall see, because like I said, people are becoming restless. People are becoming restless. All right. But we shall see. We shall see. We will continue on this program to make it very clear where we stand. Where we stand on this. Certainly, our position is that a coalition is the best way to maximize the support among the base. And whatever comes from outside of the base, the coalition is the best. Nigel, for example, is concentrating a lot in the Amerindian areas. I think that's a very brilliant strategy. He has roots there. The PFC has roots in the Amerindian community, and that makes a lot of sense, the division of labor. Of course, you know that our party, the WP, and myself, we've been paying attention to the African Guyanese community, not because we are an African Guyanese party, but because we feel that political parties have not paid enough attention to African Guyanese issues. And we feel that as we go into an election, we have to address African Guyanese as African Guyanese. We do address Amerindians as Amerindians. That's what Nigel is doing. He's gone into Amerindian communities, and he came out and he's talking about Amerindian issues, indigenous people's issues. And that is correct. That is correct. You must talk about the particular issues of our ethnic communities. And there are particular issues that Indian Guyanese face that perhaps the AFC can speak about. And we in the WP are saying that none of the other parties is speaking directly to African Guyanese issues. They're speaking to it indirectly. And we are saying that we want to be, we are taking on that task of speaking to African Guyanese issue as African Guyanese. It is something the PNC has never really done effectively. And PNC leaders will tell you it's difficult to do it. It's difficult because once you begin to speak to African Guyanese issues, you're shut out from the Indian Guyanese community, hence the so-called crossover votes would not come. And the PNC has danced somewhere there in the middle. We in the WPA have adopted in the past the old notion of multiracialism, and we still do. We still do, and that is why we are saying that if one of the parties can get into the Amerindian constituency and speak to their issues, and another of the parties can speak to the Indian Guyanese issues, and all of us can speak to the African Guyanese issues, but one of us speak to the African Guyanese issues in a germane way as African Guyanese. And that is where, because we still believe that there are 20-25% of African Guyanese who don't vote, partly because the boss we have. And we in the WP are saying that somebody needs to speak to those people. Somebody needs to speak to those young people. And we have begun to do that. It doesn't mean that we are only concerned about the issues of Black people. That is absolutely not true. But we are saying in a coalition, you have to have roles. And perhaps our rhetoric is going to quickly reach to that African Guyanese young man, young woman, was opted out of the political process. And you can bring them into the political process when you speak to them directly, not just speak to them in this broad way as youth, because they're different youth. African Guyanese youth are more likely to be shot by the police and hunted down by the police than Indian Guyanese youth or Amerindian Guyanese youth. So what are you talking to them about youth? Their youth experiences are different. And I think, and we in the WP are saying, we can speak to the African Guyanese youth and try to bring them on board. And if we can get of that 25%, 25% who don't vote, if we can get half of them to vote, we are putting together a winning formula. And so that is why coalition politics are important. So, we in the WPA want to make it very clear. We have not turned our backs on coalition politics. There were some concerns in some parts of the PNC that our naming of a presidential candidate meant that we were going on our own. And they expressed their concerns. And, I had a few conversations with Mr. Norton on the subject, on the issue. And I think we have an understanding of what we are doing and so forth. And I hope Mr. Norton was able to allay some fears that people in his camp as like I said, in Buxton, for example, I have been asked that question, whether they wanted us to name our team, and we named our team. And then they said they hope that this don't mean that we're walking away from the coalition. And I have dealt with my village on that. I was in Golden Grove and I was stopped by some people and asked the same question. And I was able to speak to them, not at a public meeting, but informally. People are concerned about the subject. But we are here and we are continuing the struggle. I am confident that in the end, we will do what is best for our constituency and what the constituency asks us to do. So until tomorrow, at the same time, same place, 7 o'clock, stay well. And tomorrow, Eric Phillips is going to be here.